Flipping it up and out. Bogues! A recent block by Bogut.
Good recovery by Andrew Bogut.
Let's get rogue.
Welcome to Rogue Bows. This is the basketball series. Myself and Mike Procopio. Pro news from the US.
Just a lot of fucking college basketball. That's all that's going on in the US, man. And look, I don't care. Like, you could love it, you could hate it. One thing I think we could all agree on: let's stop with the fucking coaches dancing in the locker room after they win like a fucking jackasses that they are. But besides that, I'm good. I don't care about college basketball. I don't like watching it, but I don't care if you like it or you don't like it. That's your prerogative. But I'm fucking tired of it. Nationwide, at all levels, these coaches dancing in the locker room just for fucking social media bullshit. It's not even like real. It's fake, and it's fucking gives you glaucoma, makes you bleed from the eyes watching it. But besides that, everything's great, Bogues. How about you?
Yeah, basketball's going crazy. You got March Madness, the NBA's heating up, the NBL just finished. So there's a lot going on. Not much new here, Pro. Just, NBL season's finished now. So free agency's about to start. We'll get into that a little bit later. But much of a muchness. Looking forward to getting into this episode and the NBA playoffs coming up. Most notably, there's a lot going around. This is kind of where there's a lot of things going on in the NBA. So we'll get right into it. Team of the week, man. Tough pick this week. I had half of the Western Conference could be the team of the week. There's a lot of teams that are playing well in the West. The East, not so much. East a bit more kind of inconsistent, you could say. Right. Boston standard 1-3. Cleveland have won 4 in a row. Toronto and the Bulls have won 2 in a row. The Orlando Magic have won 3 in a row, so they're playing okay. But the West has, you got the Nuggets had a lossless week. The Grizzlies have won 6 straight. Sacramento 2 straight. Golden State 3 straight. That's pending right now. They're playing Minnesota as we speak. New Orleans 4 straight. So a lot going on, but I've decided to go with New Orleans. They were down in the dumps and out of the plane as of a couple of weeks ago. Big injury bug, inconsistent lineups. Zion's still not back, but they seem to have found a little bit of form. They haven't played the best teams, but you can only play what's in front of you. And their last few wins have been very impressive. They've won 4 straight. They beat Houston by 10, and they belted the Spurs, which you should do. But the Spurs have been playing pretty well over the last 3 or 4 weeks, being consistent. And they belted Charlotte by 19, and then they belted the Clippers. So based on that Clippers game, Clippers are in form, and they beat the crap out of them.
Yeah, well, that being said about San Antonio being consistent, they lost by 43 to Boston today. One of their worst losses in the history of the pop culture, no pun intended. So,
interesting. But before that, they were kind of looking. Yeah, no, you're right. They've sucked the last couple of games, but I'm saying over the course of the month, they've been much more consistent. They had that lull where they were getting blown out by everyone. They still let's be honest, they're still not trying to win by any means. They're not trying to win at all, but they were a bit more consistent with their effort, and it was a club. They stole a few games they shouldn't have. So, but anyway, New Orleans, they move up to 7 now. That Western Conference is going to be fun to watch as we stand right now. So you've got, Dallas have just fell out of the plane. We'll get into them a little bit later. They're in 11, and they're 1 game behind OKC, who are in 10, and OKC are 2 games behind. 2.5 games behind 4th in the West, which is the Phoenix Suns. So the Phoenix Suns potentially could lose, they lose 3 games in a row. They could fall all the way to 10th from 4th. So that bracket from 4 to 11, even the Jazz, you can include them because they're half a game behind 11 in 12th spot. So from 4 to 12 is within, a 4-game stretch, which is amazing this late in the season. So there's going to be a lot of movement going on. The Lakers have surged, but I'm excited to see how this plays out with the play-in, and New Orleans get my tip of the hat this week, Pro.
Yeah, Bogues, they're good. Look, they're solid. They play hard. Even with the injury bug, you still got guys like McCollum, Herbert Jones, Trey Murphy's a good one to watch. They play hard, and they're well coached. They're doing a good job. They're fighting. It's hard. Look, it's hard to win when your best players are out. 2 of your best 3 players are out. I think McCollum and Ingram sort of have more impact sometimes in the game than Zion, just because he's not just consistent playing. So it's really hard to sort of judge that. But it's good to see. It's good to see they're fighting back and and they're battling throughout the playoffs. But they do play a lot of players, and those guys, the more minutes they rack up because of injuries, they're going to get better. So it's good to see. It's a solid team. Yeah, it's definitely a solid team to pick.
For sure. Who you got?
Bogues, I'm just going to go off of today's game. I'm going to go, my team of the week is going to be the Charlotte Hornets. Look, they're one of the worst teams in the league. They got very little talent. They got injuries, players that are just sort of, thrown together. Very well coached, but just they won 3 out of 4, even though they beat Dallas back to back. Well, not back to back, but 2 out of the last 3 days they beat Dallas. They beat Indiana, which again, Indiana's not good, but they play hard and they're well coached, so it's good. And look, there's not a lot to fight for at this end of the year. They're one of the worst teams in the league, yet they beat Dallas. Which look, Dallas got their problems, and we'll dive into that. But I think that I got to give those guys recognition. Look, we say Orlando won 3 in a row. That's true, but Orlando's been battling all year. They've been really good. Like they've been beating like the lower teams consistently, and they're decent against the mid, and they've beaten some good teams where Charlotte just doesn't have it. And look, they got guys like Dennis Smith contributing, Oubre contributing, PJ Washington, Nick Richards has been picking it up, and just got an extension. I got a couple years. So, so that's my team, Charlotte Hornets.
I selected them a couple of weeks ago when they won. I think they won 5 straight at that point, about just over a month ago in mid-February. So they're, for a tanking team, they're still competitive, and I agree they're well coached. And like I said back then, I think they're probably the funnest shit team to watch because they are exciting the way they play. They play free flowing. Their commentators are awesome. Not sure they overdo it sometimes, but for those of you who have League Pass, I would suggest you log into a Charlotte game and get the home team commentators. They're pretty good. They get really, really into it and yell and scream, and it's kind of a little bit different from some of the other schools we have out there. Teams we have out there. Schools, March Madness, but it makes it interesting for sure. All right, my week of the week. I mean, you surely have the same as me. It's got to be Dallas Mavericks,
yeah, definitely.
Right? I mean, they are fucking awful. They look absolutely discombobulated, and we'll get into a little bit because you know this team better than I do, but they're 3-8 in the last 11, some horrid losses, but you lose to Charlotte twice in the space of a week. I don't care what you're dealing with injury wise. If you can't readjust after a poor loss against Charlotte to then lead that into another poor loss versus Charlotte, man, you don't deserve to be even in the play-in in the West. But since the Kyrie trade, they're 6-9 with Kyrie on the floor. They're 5-12 5-12 total. Since the Kyrie trade, Kyrie's missed a couple of games here or there. They're in the 11th seed, and they just, I'm putting this down to Finney Smith was really big for them, and they're starting to realize how big he was. He's an all-league defender. He didn't need the ball. He's going to lock in 110% of the time defensively. If he doesn't get a touch for 10 straight trips, he's not going to mope. He's going to crash the offensive board from the perimeter. And his 3-ball was getting better. It was getting very, very respectable. And I think, obviously he's not in the echelon of a Kyrie Irving, but this is a discussion to have around role players sometimes are just as important as bringing in a star, because what Finney Smith did was let Luka continue to be Luka. Like, you're getting all the touches. They had Dinwiddie as a backup who could come in and handle the ball, but it was Luka. Now Luka's going to share the load a little bit with Kyrie. They're both not great defenders. Kyrie and Luka, it is what it is. They're both pretty poor defenders when it comes to it. Kyrie can be average when he really wants to be, but they're not great defenders. They're perimeter guys. You don't have a lot of rim protection. Jason Kidd does like to go small in switching lineups, and it's just teams are getting in the paint and just getting whatever the hell they want, and then they'll adjust, and then it's open threes, and they're in some trouble. I mean, Luka's comments as well over the last week, we must mention in this, basically saying there's no joy, I don't enjoy this, there's no fun in this, it's very, very frustrating. Well, no shit, it's got to be for everybody. They should be much better than they are. They've still got time to turn it around in the West. As we said, they're in 11 and they still have time to turn this thing around. But, they don't have a lot of time, and I don't think they've played together enough to know the nuances that it takes playing with two superstars and losing those role players, like I said, in Finney-Smith, don't help the cause, bro. Who you got? You got Dallas as well?
Yeah, I got Dallas as well. Look, you got to beat Charlotte. I mean, come on. I mean, like you said, I don't care what you're dealing with. You got to be at
least 1 out of 2. Like, you can let one slip, but then don't back it up a couple of nights later and lay an egg as well.
I don't even think I agree to disagree. I think they should beat them both, but you're right. At least one, and at least at home. And look, they're dealing with some stuff, but it is funny. You watch those guys play, and I didn't watch today yet. But like with those two guys on the floor, without analyzing it with the stats and stuff and the analytics, it's not like terrible basketball. It's not, it's not Kyrie dribbling out the clock. It's not like that. It's just they're just not winning games. I think when you trade two guys like Dinwiddie and Dorian being the more important, but Dinwiddie, it's two guys that really contributed in their own way. Dinwiddie handled the ball. He was sort of like a mini Jalen Brunson in the sense that he could score, he could handle the ball. You could run him and pick and roll. You could do some things. Dorian was the defender. Doesn't need the ball in his hands, can catch and shoot. All the stuff that you've already said. And I think that when you lose that, and now you got to figure it out. Now you're not as deep. You trade 2 for 1. You are more talented, but you lose defense. Which is a big part of things. And you're trying to get those guys to play together, Irving and Doncic. I don't think it's disgusting basketball to watch. Like I told you when they made the trade, I thought it was going to be a week, and it's after a week, it's not going to be good. And it just hasn't. They haven't clicked. It hasn't worked. But let's just talk about this week. Losing those two teams, losing that team twice. You just can't do that. I understand that you can't beat really good teams with the team that they have. And they couldn't beat really good teams with the team they had before the trade. But you got to be able to pummel teams below you, they're much below you. And they haven't been able to do that. They haven't found consistency. And they're just sort of spiraling. So, yeah, they're my team of the week as well.
And just goes to show you that they made a home run play, high risk, high reward trade, and it hasn't worked out. They were better with the squad that knew that squad at least played with each other for a couple of years and knew the ins and outs of each other. And you bring in Kyrie, try to hit that home run, which you probably let's be honest, they probably had to do, pro. Luka Doncic's comments around he's coming to free agency soon. He wants stars. The media was starting to get on him. The fan base, like, come on, Cuban, bring in some stars. So you had to make that trade. You can't fault it. In hindsight, they still probably make the trade. I think so, but they need to figure it out. So hopefully Dallas can get it right. I still think they can get it right enough to get a play in. OKC are playing some pretty good basketball. They're inconsistent, but they're okay. The Lakers, I'm not sold on, but I still think they probably get a play in at this point. Who gets knocked out? I think it's probably out of OKC, the Lakers, and Dallas, in my opinion. So we'll watch that space. All right, Portland firing up the tank, pro, real quick. So Dame apparently is going to be shut down in the coming weeks. They've fallen to 13th. They're now 5.5 away from the play-in. So yeah, they're not. They need to basically win 10 straight and hope one of those teams really bombs to get in there. So I think they're done. Smart move. Most teams do this usually earlier. Portland was still kind of in the mix for a play-in, but they're shutting him down, and this is perfectly normal for all the fans out there. This sometimes happens with 20 or 30 games left. You'll shut down your superstar, protect them for the next season, and see what you got on the development ranks, pro, right?
Yeah, they're in shambles right now. They just continue to be in that mode of, look, you've got a superstar in your team and you can get a laundry list full of things. One of the biggest trades in NBA history as far as what you can get back for Dame. And they refuse to do it because they obviously want to keep it together. But look, they don't really have a lot. And he's got a calf thing. You don't want to wear him out for what? What are you going to wear him out for? You're going to wear him out to get to what, 12? It's almost impossible for them to make any sort of headway with this thing. You're 4 games back with what, like 60, 70. So what was that, 9 to go?
10
So
games.
they're obviously eliminated from things. So what are you gonna do? It, And yeah, they're tanking, but they're tanking, but they're four. I mean, what have you? I don't think they could tank it and try to get to the first pick. Obviously, they can't do that, but there's not a lot to play for right now. In my opinion, you got to trade the guy. You got to trade him. Stop the nonsense. He is probably the most dedicated to his city player that's playing right now. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. The guy is a warrior with that. But at the end of the day, as a team, forget about him for a second. Like, yeah, he wants to win. I'm sure in the back of his head, he wants to go to a team where it's a little easier, not a lot easier. He probably doesn't want to go with 5, all first team NBA guys to play on one team, but he wants it to a little bit easier. A guy in his prime battling for the 12 seed probably isn't what he's probably thinking about. And as a team, you've got all these players around him. You can get way more than, not way, but you get a lot more than what Utah and Minnesota traded for. Any of these trades in the last 3 or 4 years, Harden, Chris Paul, Paul George trade with Oklahoma City and LA Clippers. Like, you can get a laundry list of picks, players, whatever you want, and sort of just try to recycle this thing. There's a little bit of talk with the Billups thing. Is he safe? Is he not safe? It's interesting. There's really not a lot to play for at this point. Like you said, they're going to tank, just to at least get probably a couple more ping pong balls here and there. But I think mostly you can't run him ragged. You can't run Dame ragged just to get to the 12 seed. So I agree with the move. I think you got to shut him down and just see what you're going to do for the summer. But I think they really got to strongly consider in trading this guy.
Yeah, they're. I mean, what's their ceiling even with the healthy roster next season? Maybe scratching a 6 seed, which I doubt. Probably a plane anyway. So you got to reevaluate and say it's time to move on. It seems like Dame is pretty stubborn and he's not going to ask for it. They're going to have to push him out the door, and they can rebuild around Simons and get some picks next season, the season after. But I agree with that, bro. They're going nowhere fast. It's nice to have a star player like that, but at some point you got to rebuild for the future. And I don't think Dame at this point is going to get him to the promised land. They're probably going to put together a 5 or 10 year plan and move it on. All right, LeBron. I had LeBron back soon when I wrote this last night, and he played today. And then I'm not joking about this. I wrote, does it change the surging Lakers and the way they're playing? Because we've both mentioned now, I'm going to prefix, say that I'm not saying LeBron hurts them, but it was noticeably different that they became a bit more consistent and it was a free-flowing, we don't need to look for LeBron and make sure that he's running our shit type offense. And they were definitely a bit better defensively. Now, AD was healthy as well, which helps. But as of today, his first game back, they lose. They lose to the Bulls. So it's pretty interesting. But look, he should help him. But I don't know. It just doesn't fit with LeBron. When he wasn't on the floor, the ball was whipping around a little bit more. I felt like AD was much more of a focus for them to get him the ball and get him his touches and play off him. When LeBron's in the lineup, it takes touches away from AD, and they need to go to LeBron. Now, LeBron was chasing the scoring record. Every man and his dog knew that. So there was a little bit of disparity in his play there, especially defensively. But look, if he comes fully fit and firing around, his kind of defensive assignments and offensively being the second, third option at times, that they'll be okay. But just something clunky with him in the lineup, bro.
Folks, it reminds me a little bit. And look, LeBron's a great player. Don't not get it twisted. He is a great player, but he plays a certain style that at his age now, you got to move the ball. The ball's got to move. And if it sticks, you better be a hell of a shot maker and a hell of a, you got to get stuff done. He gets stuff done in his own way, but sometimes it's not pretty. Like, his best basketball that he ever played was with the Miami Heat. That ball moved. Like, he just had a cut. He had just, things, his passing was great. His defense was great. Now it's just sort of, it sticks. It reminds me of with Carmelo Anthony when he played for the Knicks in Linsanity, right? people want to know why like Linsanity worked and why it happened. Well, people don't maybe forget like you had Carmelo Anthony hurt. So like now instead of having an ISO guy where four guys are watching one guy sort of handle the ball and shoot and all that, you had Jeremy Lin. Then you had, first of all, you had Lin and Tyson Chandler in pick and roll, right? So, in D'Antoni's system, so roll him in the rim, roll him in the rim, roll him in the rim all day. Then you had Landry Fields and Novak that can make shots. You had Shumpert and guys like Shumpert, J.R. Smith. So the floor got spaced. There was more ball movement. Guys just either, dribble kick for a shot, lob to Tyson Chandler. Lin was just ridiculous and he could score, but he didn't hold the ball like that. The ball moved. So with the Lakers, it's the same thing. When you have, when you have a lineup with like Austin Reeves and, you had, instead of LeBron, you have like Reeves who's going to pick and roll score, can make shots. You had Schroeder and Russell and guys like that. The ball moves more and there's a little more energy. And it sticks a little bit with Davis, but I think with LeBron, it's just the ball just sticks more. And that's why when they won the championship and they had Rondo, where like it took LeBron off the ball and all he had to do was run the floor and just get to his spots, and Rondo found him. I think that's when they played their best basketball, when he gets off the ball. I mean, on the ball, great. He's a great passer, great playmaker at times, but it can't be like 36 minutes a night of it. And I think when he gets off the ball and the ball just moves, he's a better deal. But when he gets back in the lineup, now like it sort of chokes out some of the players that have been playing well, because now they're just standing around watching him try to, make home run plays. And it's just tough. And like getting Jared Vanderbilt and getting guys like that just sort of give more energy and, again, don't need the ball in their hands. It I think proves to be a little bit more in the winning side. And you're right. It does impact them in a negative way when he just not just him in the lineup, but him in the lineup holding the ball constantly. I think it just puts them in a tough spot.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to watch to see how they go. Other notable, KD's supposed to be back on Wednesday, so we'll watch that space as well. That's huge for the Suns, and making that obviously a somewhat a home run trade for them as well. We're giving up a lot of their defense to get KD in that lineup, and we've spoken about it at length, or at least I have, is they need to play together and get some continuity together on lineups and whatnot with KD in there. So that'll be interesting to watch. Ime Udoka has popped up as a name for the Houston Rockets and Toronto Raptors. Not vacancies yet, Pro, but they both have employed coaches as of now. But there's rumors that your boy Nick Nurse is taking himself and his hat elsewhere. He's going to leave, and the Rockets, obviously, I think there's been a lot of turmoil there. Every man and his dog can see that they're in trouble coaching-wise, and they're going to need a new voice in that locker room with that young group. What do you think? You think he even considers any of these two jobs, and will he take that roulette job of the Houston Rockets?
I don't know. It's a good question, Bogues. Like, everyone's a little delusional in this thing where they think they're more valuable and maybe they're above things, especially going to the finals. He's had success, even though he obviously took a big hit with what happened off the court in Boston. I mean, look, if that Rockets job does open up, you've got a ton of young talent. I call it an AU team because that's what it is. And they've got all these guys that are just a little too comfortable on the court and a little bit too like lackadaisical, a little bit too just like, playing cool. I think that if you're going to take that job, he sort of cleaned up the Celtics. Because remember, the Celtics before trade deadline last year, I don't think anyone had them even getting close to the finals. And they were struggling. Everything was running ragged, to be honest with you. And he sort of cleaned it up in the second half of the year. And if you're going to have what's happening there now, I think with Udoka could clean some of that up. I think that, I don't know. It's tough. It's a tough job. And it's nothing to do with Steven Silas not doing it, because he's one of the smartest coaches in the league. But it's just tough when you have that many young players and not a lot of veteran presence. I think that if I'm Udoka, I'm asking those questions if I do get interviewed for the job, and it opens up like, what are you doing with this roster? Like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do with veterans? What are we going to do with more culture type players rather than just having all these young players that are just going to be really tough to deal with collectively. And that's going to be tough. I would think Udoka would take the job. I think he would take the job.
With who?
With Houston.
Houston?
Yeah, with Houston, I think he would take it because again, they're in it to win it with the French kid. And I think that like I'd probably wait till the lottery balls are dropped, to be honest, and see where they're at with that.
Play a bit of chess.
Yeah, but like who wouldn't want to coach that kid, right? So, but then again, it's another young guy, and what are you going to do there either?
Oh, you got to move off some of those. If you're Houston, you get Victor. You got to move off some of those knucklehead young guys. You just have to. I mean, Kevin Porter Jr. Like you don't want Victor coming into that kind of locker room. You're gonna have to bring in a couple of vets and get rid of some of those young guys for some star players. That's what I would do. You can't have this whole dream that these fantasy GMs out there like put together a young team and build them for 3 or 4 years. It doesn't work. They're competing with each other in a locker room for touches and points and minutes and all that kind of shit. And I'm the man on this team. I'm the max guy. So, yeah, to your point, I think if they do that, they definitely clear out that locker room and bring in some veteran presence.
Yeah, and look, everyone wants to compare them a little bit to what Oklahoma City had back when they had Durant and those guys. You can't compare it. You can't compare for a couple of reasons. A, that roster was built much better in Oklahoma City than it ever would be in Houston. Like they had like Nick Collison, they had veterans leadership. You had a coach, in place that's been there for a bit. You had all this stuff going, and those players are way better than what they've got in Houston. Look, they've got their roster. Look, they've got good young players. I wouldn't say they have like great young players. I think Jalen Green is a talent that has to be sort of cultivated. Kevin Porter Jr. puts up numbers, but I'm not a huge fan. Jabari Smith has been a little underwhelming, and I think Sengun is a guy that is sort of a little underrated, to be honest with you. He's really put up really good numbers, 14-8, and he's been the sort of the tough guy and just sort of plays the game right. And then you've got the second unit. There's not a lot there. There's really not a lot there, especially their headliners. But then again, I don't know. Like I've heard the adage, you need whores to run a whorehouse, right? Like, what are you gonna do? You got talent, keep it together and and develop it. And who cares? Like you're not winning games. But I just think that like you throw another young player in there, and I think it gets the frustration level will go through the roof. Like what are you doing? I think from where they are right now, I agree with you. I'm probably moving Kevin Porter Jr. I'm probably, you either got to bring Jabari Smith off the bench, because I think with Victor's physical, I don't think you can't obviously play him at 5. You need a strong guy like Sengun to sort of like battle underneath. Maybe you bring Jabari Smith off the bench and you give him 28, try to find him 25 minutes a night, 28 minutes a night. I really like Kenyon Martin Jr. I think I think he's been a really good role player for them. So Bogues, I don't know. If I'm Udoka, I mean, look, that Raptors job probably has more talent to win. But the idea that you could coach Victor, because you don't know what Victor's going to be. He obviously is a big time talent, but like, why wouldn't you want to coach a guy like that? Why wouldn't you want to coach a guy like that? So I would think that after the lottery pick, after the lottery balls, I think Udoka, if they're not number one, then Udoka will go for the Raptors. If those two jobs are the jobs that he's gonna sort of try to pick from.
Will be good to watch. Interesting. All right. Rest in peace to Willis Reed, by the way, pro. Really, really, superstar player of his era. 650 games, 18, just under 19 points, just under 13 rebounds. Passed away last week at the age of 80. He's infamous for getting severely hurt in a final series against who was that against, pro? Let me see. Back in the where was
Lakers?
That?
In the 60s.
1970 NBA Finals. Yes, it was the Lakers. Yes, so injured late in Game 5, missed Game 6, and then no one knew whether he'd play in Game 7. Not even his teammates, according to them. He ran out, and the whole crowd erupted. There's famous footage online. It was an awesome atmosphere. that's probably the moment everyone remembers Willis Reed for. Comes out and has 38 points, which was, huge in that win. So rest in peace to him and condolences to his family. Another NBA legend has passed away, pro. We're all getting old, so that's how life goes. All right, March Madness. I haven't really followed this too much, pro. I don't know if you have, but we're down to the Final Four. So San Diego State is playing FAU. That's Florida Atlantic for those playing at home. On the other wing of the Final Four, you've got University of Miami versus UConn. Now, I always just go for the lower seeds in these circumstances, so I hope FAU wins it just because they're, I wouldn't say a nothing-nobody school, but they are kind of a nothing-nobody school that no one really pays much attention to, and they're right there playing against the big dogs. So that's kind of where it's at right now. I've caught a couple of games, just a couple of minutes, but I haven't sat down and watched Pro. Have you?
I watched Gonzaga play a couple of times, and that's about it. I'm not a college guy, as far as liking to watch it. I think it's been almost unwatchable for the last few years. It's been going downhill probably for the last decade or so. But in the last few years, it's been really, really bad. And for me, it's just tough. I go with Fox's assessment of it. It's tough. No shot making, basketball IQ all time low. You got the transfer portal stuff, so it makes these teams. That's why I like all the teams that are left. I mean, look what you have left in the tournament. No offense to anyone else, but Creighton, Florida Atlantic. It's great to see teams win. Don't get me wrong. Like the underdog win. Don't get me wrong at all. But like UConn, UConn's a scrappy team. They're decent. You got Creighton. You've got Florida Atlantic. You got San Diego State. You had Princeton was in the Sweet 16. Which is great to see, but like I think with the rosters just keep on flipping every year with the transfer stuff, it just makes it really volatile for sure. So I watched Gonzaga because I watched them a couple of times throughout the year. Game was on, whatever. The kid Drew Timme was one of the best players in college basketball. Tough kid, strong, really knows how to play. But yeah, those are the only couple of games I watched. I didn't watch anything today. I've heard there was a couple of really close games and exciting games and things. And it's March Madness, it's a tournament. It's great. Don't get me wrong, but it's hard. It's hard to watch to me. Not that the NBA's some perfect game either, but like I just think the shot making, the talent level. I think the coaches are way better. I mean, I think half the coaches in college basketball will coach the 92 Dream Team to a bronze medal, to be honest with you. I think they're, I'm not a big fan of college coaches these days. There are a few really good ones, but a lot of them are just empty suits, to be honest with you.
Yeah, De'Aaron Fox made those comments a couple of days ago. He was asked about March Madness and was pretty cynical about the whole thing and said, look, I don't watch it. I don't enjoy it. I think the refereeing is bad. I don't think the talent's as good as as the NBA and as it once was. And some people like college for its purity. That's kind of gone now, pro, with the NIL stuff and players getting paid and the portal. This transfer portal, players moving teams like they're free agents in the NBA. It's taken away some of that kind of pureness of what amateur athletics was meant to be, and that went in that tricky path, the NCAA, of trying to keep it amateur, but it clearly wasn't because they're making billions. So it's like, is it really amateur? You're making all the money, the kids aren't. So the kids had to get paid and receive benefits. But yeah, look, the NBA's the pinnacle of athleticism, of skill, of smarts and coaching, right? Like even if you're a bad coach and you manage to get an NBA job, you're going to get infinitely better with the tools and resources you have. With analytics, if you actually work hard, you could come in as the dumbest coach in the world. But if you have a work ethic and are willing to listen, the environment you're in is world-class. Technology, computers, analytics, stats, on-court stuff, walkthroughs, chopping it up on planes and buses and in someone's ear about what do you think about this coverage? Like it's endless. You can improve yourself till the cows come home. So I somewhat agree. I haven't really followed. I followed college only for a year or two after I left, like every college kid does, because you have a bond with those teammates that stayed over or a coach, and that was me. And then the coach I had got fired a couple of seasons later, and then I kind of just lost kind of that appeal to continue to follow. I support my school when I can if they're in a big football game or a basketball game, I'll definitely put out some posts and try to watch it. But I'm not one of those guys that's watching it every single game, and it just doesn't interest me that much. And I guess having 2 young kids as well doesn't help the cause, bro. When you get a moment to yourself, you're kind of doing other things. It was a great time, and college has its need, but it definitely has changed over the course of our time, pro. All right, let's move on to our Aussies of the week. Dabble is the sponsor of the Aussies of the week, so we appreciate Dabble's support, the social betting experience. We can follow anyone from your best mate or me, Andrew Bogut, all one word, if you want to give me a follow. Trying to get some right for you. I've missed a few the last couple of weeks, 3 out of 4 and 4 out of 5, which is frustrating in some multi-bets, but that's okay. Give me a follow, copy bets, jump into the banter channel if you want to have a bit of a back and forth with some like-minded people in whatever your passion is in betting. Download the app at the Apple Store, Dabble, all one word, Dabble socially. Gamble responsibly is the most important thing you have to do when you gamble. Always do it responsibly. Aussie Watch, here we go. Ben Simmons out for what is now the season, pro. Nerve impingement is the rumor. They're saying that he's probably going to be out for the rest of the season. So hopefully he gets that back right, so we can cross him out of this Aussie of the week and stop researching his stats, because I was making sure, pro, that I didn't do a Josh Green again. I'm going and checking Ben Simmons' stats and they're empty, and I'm like, am I missing this again? Like, I'm Josh Green. So I haven't made that mistake again. Dyson Daniels, he's been struggling, pro, since the comeback, at least numbers-wise. He brings a lot more than you see on paper. He's probably one of their best perimeter defenders for a young guy. They've got a few other pieces, but he's way ahead of the curve as far as defense for being that young. Usually rookies take 2, 3, 4, 5 years, but he was 1 point, 2.3 rebounds, 1.6 assists, and a steal a night. Daly, 5-2-2 in 19 minutes with Fox out the other night, so got a little bit of minutes there, but otherwise it was another garbage minutes week for him where he didn't play a lot. Paddy has not played since March 9th. He finally got back into the game today. 4 points, 2 assists in some garbage time, so good to see him out there. Jock had a pretty productive week. Jock Landale, 7.6 points, 4.3 rebounds, 1.6 assists. Josh Giddey, who will get the Aussie of the week, another big week for him, 18.7 points, 9.2 rebounds, 6.25 assists. So this will be his 11th Aussie of the week. He's had that trophy wrapped up about 6 weeks ago. Matisse Thybulle, 6 points, 4 rebounds, 1 assist per game with 1.25 steals. So usual numbers for him. Joe Ingles, 7.3 points, 1 rebound, 3 assists, 6 for 12 from 3. So shooting the ball a little bit better, but not as productive at the offensive end. Usually we like to see Joey at the 4 to 5 assist mark when he's playing his best basketball. Jack White still in the G League. Josh Green, a down week from where he was last week, 7.25 points, 2.5 rebounds, 1 assist and 1 steal. Xavier Cooks over there in Washington, not a lot of minutes, a little bit of garbage time today and the other night, but nothing to note. So that is our Aussies this week, pro. NBL, Australia. Free agency is about 3 or 4 days away. End of this week it opens up. So there's a lot going on. There's a big marquee names available. Will McDowell-White, who the Sydney Kings faced against New Zealand. He's probably one of the big marquee names. Keanu Rapinda's up there. So 2 very big names that are out there that we're talking to. Everyone's talking to. I think every team in the league's talking to those guys to see what they're thinking. Whether we go that route, we don't know yet. We're still trying to retool our roster and find out exactly who's coming back. The Kings have retooled to an extent. Galloway, Glover both re-signed. Big re-signings for us. They were part of our bench. And Kawhi Noy, we've picked up his team option at a little bit of a big number than it was last season, but that's his reward for being a championship winner. So that's the Kings. One thing to note for all the fans out there, and pro, you might like this. So Australia has marquee rules. So if you bring back a big note Australian, there's a thing called a marquee rule where, say you bring back Joe Ingles next season, you can pay him whatever you want. Only 250 or 260,000 counts on your cap. So you still got to pay, obviously, the rest in cash. So if you pay him $1 million a year, you're still paying him $1 million a year, but you don't get penalized for it. Only 260 or 250 of that. So there's also an Indigenous marquee rule. You can have an Indigenous guy on your roster that doesn't hit your cap at all, and an Asian player exemption. So if you have an Asian player on your roster in the NBL Pro, it doesn't count towards your cap. So what the Japanese league is soaring. They're doing very, very well, both from a financial standpoint, competitive standpoint. They love signing Australians. A lot of Nikkei, most notably, I think Angus Brandt was over there, former Perth Wildcats. But they'll overpay for guys to go over to their league. They love Australians. They're, no drama. They'll play hard, blah, 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 good team people. And they price out, like a Nick Kay's making much more money over there than he can make in Australia. What I'm hearing now and what the scuttlebutt around the league is that the Japanese league, the NBL has an Asian marquee rule. Guess what the Japanese league is going to do, Pro?
Australian rule?
Yeah, they're going to have an Australian marquee rule. So they're going to have basically an exemption for an Australian player that doesn't count on your cap, so probably one a team. And that's a concern for the league. As an owner, I know the league ownership is worried about it and how do we mitigate this, because I don't know how many teams there are in the B League, Japanese B League, I think it's called. I probably should have looked it up. But let's say there's 10 teams. That's 10 of your best players out of your league that could potentially go over there for probably 2 to 3x what they're making as a max player in the NBL. So just something to note for fans out there. Watch that space to see what happens with this. If we start seeing more players floating over to Japan, that would be a reason. So it could hurt a little bit, Pro.
Look, Japan's probably one of the more soaring leagues as far as popularity, money they put in, acquiring more talent year in and year out. Kyle Collinsworth, I'm not sure if you played with Kyle in Dallas, but
yep, I was there.
So
yep.
Kyle, played in the D League about a year and a half after, getting released by the NBA the last time. And then he finally went over to Japan, making really good money, really likes the league, thinks they're really organized, a little bit better playing conditions than China. So, yeah, I mean, they're putting money behind it. You get paid. Like, that's the biggest thing. Like, the league's okay. Obviously, it's not EuroLeague or anything like that, but you get paid on time. No one ever not gets paid. They get paid. They're organized. Coaching isn't as great as the EuroLeague or in Australia or anything like that. But, look, you got really good money and you get financial stability with people getting paid on time. And I think that's a big part of it. And not that that's a problem in Australia or some of these other places, but EuroLeague, it's really a big problem. Asia, not a big problem. Australia, not a big problem from what I've heard. So, yeah, I could see why that's a worry, especially if they're going to put that Australian rule in there where, there's a lot more talent to be poached from Australia than there is, Japan, because you get the Asian rule that goes for China. I'm sure that's the other Asian countries like that. So
yes, of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you're not really taking a lot from them. Yeah, you're not taking a lot from them. They're taking a lot more from Australia. So I'd be worried for sure if I'm an Australian teams and fans for sure.
It'll be interesting to see what the league does to try and mitigate that rule. And just quickly, I looked it up. Man, the Japanese B League First Division, they play 60 regular season games in a schedule that consists of 36 games against teams within their own conference and 24 from the other conference, which is it's very, very interesting. There's 24 total teams in the First Division. So that's a lot of teams. That's 24 players then, essentially, 24 of your best stars. So your two and a half best players from every NBL team could potentially go over there. So it is a little bit scary. We'll see how that goes. All right, stats. Useful or useless, Pro. Brandon Ingram averaging 30 points per in his last 5 games. Also, his last 2 games, and this is what I want to note, 23 assists and 1 turnover, Pro. I'll give a little spiel before I give you an opportunity to answer whether this is useful or useless. It is a small sample size, but the reason why I bring in that 23 assists to 1 turnover, this was the next step of Brandon Ingram's game. When I was with him in the Lakers, he was very good on getting on the rim, but it seemed like the game it was going too fast for him at that point in his career to know, hey, the right pass is here, the right pass is there. He'd have games where he'd have 20 points, 6 assists, and 7 turnovers, those kind of games. And he's starting to figure shit out. His body, his wingspan, his athleticism. That's why I wanted to put this stat in there. I know it's only 2 games, a 23 assists to 1 turnover for a guy that I believe that wasn't his skill set early in his career. Just shows his growth, Pro. But useful or useless all up? Useless
on the last 2 in the scoring, because he is a big-time scorer in my opinion. But the 5 assists a game, and again, I don't equate basketball IQ with assist numbers, but as far as what he's done over his career, getting better at that. And I think, if you look at his stats going throughout the league, from a rookie on to now, up to 5, in the 5 range where he started at the 2 range, went up to 3, 4, 5, 6. He's really developing as a player for sure. I never really take things on a 2-game basis unless they're ridiculous numbers. Now, 23 assists, nothing to, it's a pretty good honor. Don't get me wrong.
To 1 turnover,
but it's in 1 turnover, right? But it's 2 games, what have you. But I do say useless because it's only 2. But his game is definitely getting more way more well-rounded for sure. So, what do you think, Bogues?
Yeah, I just think it's the round. Like you said, his growth as a basketball. I know some people that work with him, and they can't speak more highly of the fact that he loves basketball. You never see him doing the celebrity shit and trying to be out there. He just loves playing basketball, and he wants to better himself. I know he's investing in his own facility and doing different things, and I just love to see growth in players because this wasn't a strength of his early in his career, and I think he knew that. And the game now slowed down for him, and he's at a point where, they're talking about building around Zion, but shit, this is a guy you can legitimately build around for the next 5 to 10 years. He's young, and he hasn't hit his ceiling yet. So I think it's useful as far as that growth. Small sample size would be the useless part of it, but overall I'm going to give it a useful pro. All right. Walker Kessler, our guy in Utah, blocking everything, right? 31 points, 11 rebounds, 2 assists, 14 from 16 from the field. He's the first rookie ever to reach those numbers on 85% plus field goal percentage since Shaquille O'Neal pro. Useful, useless?
Useless because it's 1 game. But just like the Ingram thing, I think Walker Kessler is going to be a dominating defensive player, for a decade if he stays healthy. Knock on wood. He tests out of off the charts in college, getting into the league. It took him very short period of time to get into the lineup and contribute on a regular basis. Not the scorer that this 31 points gave him. I'd like to see the film. I'm sure it's a lot, on lobs and out of the dunker spot, running the floor and stuff like that. The guy is an uncanny defender. He's got great defensive feel. One of the best shot blockers that I've ever seen. I think he's going to be a Rudy type player with way more offense. And I think he's going to be really good. But a 1 game, I say it's, me, I'm not a big fan of first player to do this since whatever. But I do think he's a hell of a player. And those stats definitely are, mind-boggling. But just because I'll stay consistent with my short period of time deal. But those are a hell of a stat. And those are ridiculous stats. What do you think?
Yeah, 1 game useless, but just the fact that Shaq's name's in there and it's just the 85% is probably the kicker in this. I'm sure other people have hit these numbers as rookies, but it shouldn't undervalue the season that he's having as kind of unknown commodity coming out of the draft and whatnot. So good on Walker. He's having a great year and he's going to be a dominant force there. I think that's the main reason why they moved off Rudy as well. They thought we've got someone who's a poor man's version of Rudy right now, but we think he can get to Rudy's point, if not better, down the line. So good on the Utah Jazz. All right, the only players to ever make 180-plus three-pointers as a rookie. Donovan Mitchell, Dame Lillard, and Keegan Murray. Useful, useless?
Useful. Over a course of a season, 180-plus threes. Now, obviously with the three-point numbers being, saturated for sure as as we just get more and more into this analytical age, but that's a huge accomplishment as a rookie to be able to do that. And, look, there's a lot of rookies that crack, hard to crack lineups. You got lottery picks that sometimes don't crack lineups. This guy has cracked a lineup on a playoff team and made 180 threes as a rookie. That's pretty good. That's pretty good stuff. I would say useful.
Yeah, I would go useful as well. It's pretty impressive for a rookie to be shooting those kind of numbers. So, really, really good season for them and all the Kings in general. And they've got a really good player to build long-term with. All right, now I'll go useful on that stat, by the way. I love a good conspiracy theory pro, as we know. And this one just got sent to me before we went to air. It is a stat regarding free throw disparity. Who do you think leads the league in free throw disparity? Meaning they've got they always have more free throws than the other team. Disparity, for those wondering, is Team X has 20 free throws, Team Y has 15. That's a 5 disparity. In every game, that Team X seems to have a better disparity than the other team. Who do you think's number one in the league?
I would say Clippers, but they got too many injuries and those guys don't play enough. Milwaukee, maybe?
No. It is the Los Angeles Lakers, pro. And there's always a conspiracy around the Lakers because we know the league love to kind of give them a little nudge to make sure they're in there for TV and make sure they're in the playoffs or scratching the surface. But, pro, the numbers around the disparity are what's more alarming.
All right.
They're number one in the league in free throw disparity at 387 disparity. Okay. Number 2 is the Miami Heat at 184. So they're 2x more than anyone in the league in free throw disparity every single night. And then tonight's game, I decided to look up the stats after I saw this stat. That stat was up until 2 or 3 games ago. So I looked at today's stats and they shot 28 free throws and Chicago Bulls shot 13, pro. But interesting for those conspiracy theorists out there. There seems to be some people thinking that Adam Silver's doing anything he can to make sure that the Lakers are in that play-in/playoff series to make sure the glorious purple and gold are getting those TV ratings, pro. But useful or useless?
I think it's pretty useful, man. I mean, 2 times the second place team.
It's ridiculous.
I didn't even notice it. Bogues.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, Bogues, I didn't even notice it. That's never coming across my desk. I'm sure I know they do get calls. But here's the thing too, Bogues. LeBron was out for a while. Anthony Davis, of course, was out for a while. So it's not like those guys, they're just feeding those guys all day. They go into the basket and they go and get in the line. Like,
exactly.
Yeah, like that's weird. Like Walker, that like guys like, guys like Dennis Schroeder and guys, that team, everybody else, Austin Reeves,
yeah.
and Walker, Lonnie Walker, and guys like that are getting calls like that. That's pretty useful stuff when it's 2 times. I would definitely say useful for sure. Before we go, Bogues, before we go into the other stuff, did we cover enough of were we going to talk about Dallas again, or are we all done with Dallas? Because I remember you said we are going to go into it more. At least you said it earlier on. I just want to make sure, just in case we didn't miss anything on Dallas at all, talking about them.
If you got something more, go for it. But yeah, I think I got my spiel out about him. If you feel like you want to hit him again on the head, go for it.
No, I just that whole Luka thing at the end being not having fun. Like I know everybody automatically just put the whole Kyrie thing into effect, which I don't know. Like, do you think? I mean, obviously, it's easy to say, yeah, he doesn't like playing with Kyrie. You could say that, right? I haven't heard anything. I don't have any intel on that, but I mean, I would say that I wouldn't jump the gun on just that. I would just say that, probably hates losing and probably the Kyrie thing a little bit, but I don't know. It's weird. It's interesting what they're going to do going forward, and how much that Jalen Brunson deal affected this whole season. Could sign him for $58 million or in the mid to high 50s, and now they're into the snowball effect of trading for Kyrie and dealing with this, and then Kyrie just that word salad after almost every game, and then the FaceTime lives or the Instagram lives just talking about this stuff, and it's a weird deal in Dallas for sure.
And they're going to pay Kyrie potentially, right? They're going to give that money then to Kyrie. They could have, given to Brunson. Essentially, right? Like, I'm not saying they will, but he's a free agent.
Dude, you had a borderline all-star player that you can get for $58 million, right? And this goes for everybody that's listening and follows the NBA and tries to be like a GM going to like the trade checker every day and just, trying to play like chair GM like from their house, like. When all these guys are saying, oh, you got to make this deal today, we can't sign Brunson because then we can't trade him, or this player, there's always trades to be made. So like if you have a couple of deals, so say like, I don't know, you're trying to get like Tyrese Maxey from Philly, right? and you don't want to sign Brunson because you might want to put him in that trade. All right, well, the Maxey deal could be here 6 months from now or 3 months from now, whenever Brunson becomes tradable after the extension. Also, there are other trades that you can make a year from now or another season from now where you sign the asset. You could either keep the asset or trade them, but everybody thinks you got to make trades yesterday. And I think that Dallas tried to outsmart themselves a little bit with that for sure. But even deals that you have that's coming across your desk, like, oh, we get this deal, we could throw them in this deal. But why not just sign the asset? Because just in case these deals go away at the last second, you have this guy going forward. Imagine having a guy that's worth, okay, he's getting like $25 million, and people probably say it's a little steep. I even said that, last summer, when they signed him to that number. So even if you think he's not worth that, imagine having him for like $15 million. And now what you can do going forward, you're not forced to make these deals. You're and it's easy to say now, of course, but Western Conference finalists, you have him sewn in where he was all ready to sign it. And I guess I didn't read it yet. I'm going to read it when we get off the air here, but I guess there was a scathing article that Brunson did. I think Chris Haynes might have put it out from Yahoo Sports, but I think they were pretty negative about the whole experience in Dallas, about how that whole negotiation went. I just want to read it because I haven't really heard a lot of stories about it, but the Kyrie thing, and Kyrie, everyone's saying he's awful in the locker room, he's this and that. I don't care about any of that. The basketball part is I like him as a basketball player. I think he's a good player. I just think, and I don't even know if he's a cancer in the locker room. What I do know is he gets bored a lot and he continues just to talk. And the more, I think the more damage that he does to himself is all the talking. He's a big, he's obviously a big activist, right? Jaylen Brown's probably the biggest activist in the league, and he's not aggressive about it. He'll mention it in when he's asked about things, he'll go on air and talk about things, social justice and things like that. But he does it in a sort of positive way. He's very passionate about it. He's very well spoken about it, and then he moves on. But it seems like Kyrie gets bored and then just sort of talks himself into people not loving him anymore and just sort of saying, all right, we've had enough. I think there's a difference. I think you could use the platform of the media surrounding NBA players. You could use it in a really good way. Whatever your thoughts are on politics or whatever, what have you, you have that platform. Where Kyrie, I think, takes it to a way other level. And then to some of the stuff he comes up with and says, then you're like, all right, yeah, this is a little bit too much. So I don't know. That just
doesn't help the situation. But I think they got bigger problems than Kyrie's rants. Their roster makeup right now, their rotations. I think it doesn't help. Yeah. But it's not good. It's not good, and they need to. There's not much they can do. I mean, maybe they pick up someone that gets a buyout soon, but there's not much guys left really. So
I think
they're.
I think Maxey. I think they're going to sign and trade Kyrie. I think obviously Anthony Davis is someone that people say they'll target. I'm telling you, I think if Philly doesn't win it, Daryl Morey is huge at trying to get stars. If it doesn't work, low-key sign and trade for Maxey for Irving. I think that's something that people would think about. I'm not sure. I would just say that's something that would be looked at. But I think sign and trade for Kyrie. And yeah, you're right. But I think we could both agree that they weren't winning big games with the roster they had before the trade. The problem is when you look bad with the trade and you gave up a player that you had under contract like Dorian Finney-Smith, and Dinwiddie is somebody that you could sign. You could have signed long-term for shorter money, and you have two guys that you can trust, and then your money's coming off the cap with some of the other players you can get rid of. Yeah, for sure. But I think they had to go for the home run. I think 90% of the people out there probably didn't think it was going to work. But, the one thing they can do is sign and trade. The problem is you're going to get disgruntled superstar. And what if it doesn't work there? Anthony Davis, injury issue. Bradley Beal has had injury issues before, and it may not work with Luka. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. And then you've got, some other players that you could try to look for. So
Luka can extend next season? Is it next season? Or at least
I'm not sure. I think next season. But he already just got a supermax.
Oh, did he?
I think he just did it. Yeah, I think he did it. I think.
Okay,
yeah.
so I might be wrong.
Yes. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I just, it
just seems a scuttlebutt around. They better give something. They better build something around Luka. I thought he had less years on his deal just by that narrative. Like, oh, they better do something. He's going to leave. He's going to leave in free agency. It's like, well,
dude, 37.
If you just sign an extension,
40, 37 this year, 40 next year, 43, 24. He's signed till 26, 27. But the thing is, they're good. The problem is, though, if he just decides he wants to leave and he's all in on leaving, which he hasn't really given any indication of, that's when it becomes a problem. And there's limited moves they can make. I mean, cap room, I don't care who you are. Cap room sometimes overrated if there's no one available and the right players aren't available and you just can't attract them for one reason or another. It's a problem. So it'll be interesting. I don't want to overdo it with the conversation with that. I just wanted to sort of. I forgot that I didn't know if we were going to talk. That's why I held back a little bit because I thought we were going to talk about it later. But I saw in the run sheet that it wasn't mentioned after that. So I just wanted to make sure we got it in.
Yeah, it'd just be interesting to see whether he sticks around and who makes a play for him. But Dallas, if you're a Mavericks fan. Unlucky. All right, well, brought back the Q&As. We've heard you. We've heard the people on social media saying, can you guys bring back the Q&As? So what we're going to do, if you want your question answered in the future, we're going to take questions from social media. So generally on the weekend, sometime Australian time, Sundays, we're going to put out a post. If you put your questions in that post, we'll pick one from each social media forum. So we're currently on Twitter, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, Rogue Bogues, all one word. When you see that post, put it in the comments and you might be lucky enough to have yours read. So we'll start off with Twitter. This is from @LawZYC. What are the next 2 to 3 key things from your owner's hat perspective that need to be done to continue this momentum and crowd support in the NBL? Is it simply more teams, new markets, or is it more so increasing the cap? So I'll answer this one, Pro, because you're not an owner. But for me, there's a TV deal coming up. I hope that TV deal brings in some substantial income for the league and that then gets dispersed to the clubs. That's number one. It's still a fine line to be profitable in the NBL. It's not easy. You do need to basically make the finals to have your club be profitable. The NBL needs to make sure that even the teams that are not doing as well win-loss can become and remain profitable. That's the number one thing for me because that's how you have teams go under. That's how you have teams go bankrupt. That's how you have owners get frustrated by continuing to sign checks every season that are in the minus. People, I don't care how much money you have. If you have billions of dollars, but you're continuously writing minus checks, every man's got a time limit with that. Trust me, every man and woman's going to eventually get to a point that says, you know what, not getting bang for buck. This is frustrating. Just on principle, I'm not going to keep writing these checks. So that's number one. Number two, I think more games. Now, people argue, well, more games. How are you going to do that? We're trying to compete with AFL and footy, and sometimes we have that mindset of following their seasons of how many games they have, which is in the 20s. We're in the 30s. I would push it out a little bit more and maybe go to 36 games or 40 games, however you formulate that, or play everyone 4 times. At the moment, you play everyone, most teams 3 times and some teams 4. So I think going up to the high 30s, low 40s would be good just to get more games out there. Better for TV deals as well. So that would be my second thing. And number 3 would be along those lines. I'd extend the semi-finals to a 5-game series as well. Make the semis a 5-gamer, make the grand final a 5-gamer, make it flow nicely into it. And I think, teams that make the finals do make good money from those home games because they usually do sell out or come close to it. That'd be my 3 things. There's a lot of micro things that I would try to change. I know the league's working on a bunch of different initiatives. As I said earlier, the Japanese league is definitely a threat that we need to put in some things to try and stop that from happening. I'm not sure how. That's something we've got to brainstorm with other owners, but they're the 3 things in the NBL that I think are a key for continued growth because families are coming out, kids are coming out, parents are loving it. It's a great environment. If you've been to an NBL game, even if I'm all NBA, I don't like the NBL, I used to go to a game, go to your local game. If you're in Sydney, go to a Kings game. It's a great event for kids, especially if you've got young kids. There's a lot going on and it's a fan-friendly environment, so I encourage that. That's the first question. Number 2, this one you can get on with me, Pro. It's from Facebook, from Matt Nolan. This is a good one. We've spoken about this a couple of years ago, but do you think the Celtics keep both Tatum and Brown long term? with both looking like massive contracts coming in the future. Pro, what are your thoughts?
Folks, I think we saw this problem with Oklahoma City when they could have re-signed, they could have re-signed Harden. They could have waited. They actually traded him early before they even had to do the extension. And they decided to trade him, and they got very little back in return. I mean, they rebounded, obviously, from doing that. But I think that if you're a big market team like Boston, you have ownership with money. You have two mega superstars, one mega superstar and one superstar in Jaylen Brown. I think you have to keep him long term. I do. I mean, look, you can get a lot for either one, but why would you even want to entertain it? You've got two players that really, I think any really good GM, you've seen it in history with guys like Red Auerbach, and you saw it with the Bulls, you saw it with San Antonio. You just continued to revolve your role players and your other players around your superstars, and just try to just keep making trades and moves and things to keep you fresh, keep getting assets where you can make moves, down the line. But I wouldn't really entertain. I would pay the tax. You're a championship level team. I think you owe it to your fan base to do that. I could see if you were a really mediocre team and you had all these high contracts where you're paying tax.
Like Dallas.
Yeah, why would you do it, right? I don't even know what they pay in tax. But
so real quick, so Jason Tatum has 2 more years beyond this season, and the third year, which is 25-26, is a player option. Jaylen Brown has 1 year remaining on his contract with no options after this season. So Brown's up in 24-25. So I agree, Pro. I think you got to keep them both. You have to keep them both, just because they're scratching the finals, right? If this was your point, is what I'd put an exclamation point on. If they were mediocre, middle tier, a Dallas, one of those teams that's just kind of, maybe we're second round. No, I'd probably look to move on in a year or two. But this is becoming a better squad. Marcus Smart's locked up till 25-26. Robert Williams is locked up till the same year. They've got some continuity. They've got some decisions to make in the future. I mean, Derek White's there another 2 years. Brogdon's there another 2 years. Al Horford's there another 2 years. So you've got your core nucleus of guys. You sprinkle in a bit of youth. They're going to have to decide what they do with Grant Williams. Pritchard is there for another year as well. So they've got a good core nucleus. They can then maybe bring in a mid-level guy and a couple of young prospects, and I think they can then have some longevity. So I like it. I think you keep them both. No-brainer, Pro.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that.
All right, last one is from Instagram. This is from Crispy Charlton 23. Do you prefer watching the 90s style of basketball, which had a lot more focus on defense, or today's game where there is little defense but much more offensively based? Good question for me. I like the 90s better. Look, I think there were aspects in the 90s that I'd still tweak a little bit. I think sometimes there was too much argy-bargy and clotheslining and hard fouling. So I think with that rule around the blatant stupidity on just hard fouling guys that we have today, where it's no tolerance, I'd bring that into the 90s, and that'd be the perfect game for me. What I loved about the 90s and even the 2000s was just the difference in the styles of teams, and like two meteors colliding with completely different makeups. And that's what I enjoyed. It was like, shit, the Lakers are playing, a fast-paced team. Is the triangle going to work against them? Or the Bulls are old and raggedy, but they're playing this young, up-and-coming team that just tries to have a high tempo. And then you've got Detroit Pistons of the early 2000s. They're going to grind you out, and they want to play in the 60s and 70s. I love that battle, Pro. Like, it was chess. It was like, which coach's philosophy is going to work? Is it Phoenix Suns with D'Antoni, or is it the Detroit Pistons with who was coaching then? Larry Brown, right? Like that's what I enjoyed. So I enjoyed back then. I think today's game's too predicated on flashy offensive plays. And I disagree with the league's take on that. That's what sells tickets. Look, I think it does to an extent, but that's going to, with the quality of players you have today, it's going to come out anyway. But I still think that, I liked games around about the hundreds. That was a perfect fit for me, and that's my take on it, Pro. I think I know your take.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think for the barbaric play, I think that the barbaric play, I think you could trade off on just sort of the dumb shot selection as done across the board, from even role players. And I think that, but it's a sort of a catch-22 because, yeah, like you take a lot of bad shots from role players, but the role players are probably much more offensively gifted today. I would much rather watch 90s for sure. I thought the basketball was better. I didn't think that everybody plays the same. Like you said, I think everybody sort of had a little bit different style. Utah had the 1-4, that they ran the 1-4 stuff. You had triangle, you had Princeton on some teams ran Princeton. Yeah, it might be a little boring, it might be a little slower, but I think that with social media today, I think people want to be in the action. They want to be in the game. And I think that, yeah, it is exciting a little bit when you're scoring 140, 150, but I think they would come anyway. They like the league itself back in the 80s and 90s. It was marketed pretty well, but it was a really good product that was very marginally marketed, in my opinion, especially older 80s, 70s, 80s, whatever. But I think today, the product, in my opinion, isn't as good, but the marketing is off the charts. And that's what helps. And look, I think the skill level is way higher just because there's more. We talk about this endlessly, so I'm not going to get into it. But I just think that there is a lot of offensive explosion where like you get your 12th man doing stuff that that 12th men weren't doing in the 90s, not even close. But also, I thought the role players knew their role a lot better, and they sort of impacted winning way more than the role players today. So, in most of them, anyway. So, I think that there's good and bad in both eras for sure. I would just much rather 90s. Again, just more. I think there was just more originality in the game. There's not as much now. Everybody plays the same. Threes, layups. No mid range. Very limited. Version of it. No defense. It's just different, it's different. But yeah, I would rather 90s.
Agree. Send us off with a fact or fake news, pro.
Folks, I'm just going to ask. We talked about Ime Udoka, with possibly a couple of landing spots. Do you Ime Udoka will be coaching the NBA next year? Fact or fake news?
Fact, I think he's going to get back in the league. I think he's taken enough time off. I think teams are probably going to be comfortable enough that was now long enough ago. It seems like an eternity ago. It was only at the start of the season, I believe, October-ish. But a full 9 to 12 months before they get involved with talks for him to take over another team, I think is enough. Everyone deserves a second chance. We get on with life. I think he deserves, on his coaching merit, to be back in the league. You hope he learns his lesson for what happened off the floor. And I think, fact, he will be back in the NBA. I just don't know where.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's fact. There's probably going to be about 5 openings, give or take. There's always that 1 or 2 openings that people never thought would open, but they open. And I think that he's going to be a high candidate in most of these spots. Even Atlanta and a couple of these other spots that opened up, people are wanting to get permission to talk and all that. So I definitely think he's going to be in the NBA next year. It depends what. Maybe it's not one of those two teams that we talked about tonight. I hope it's not Houston. I really like Steven Silas. I hope he keeps things rolling there, or keeps rolling for himself. And but yeah, I think he'll be in the NBA. So I'll say it's fact. He will be in the NBA next year.
Speaking of coaching vacancies, is Jay Kidd completely safe?
No, I wouldn't think so. I'm not hearing anything, but I just think that
that's what no one's mentioned. Like, no one's mentioned that. Yeah. It's his second year, right?
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's how the business goes. Look, if they don't go that far in the playoffs, it's one thing, but how bad it's going, and you know how it is. It's a finger pointing game at some point. Whose fault was it? Who knows? And I don't like to talk about this because I don't like casually talking about people losing their jobs, but you're asking me the question. I don't think he's completely safe, especially if it ends in a really negative way. Look, they lost to one of the worst teams in the league in the last 5 years. This team is really bad, and they lost to them twice in a row, and it wasn't going great before that. So they need to do something to stop the spillage. They need to shut the spigot off and figure out how are they going to get through this, because if it ends up where they miss the playoffs and I think it all depends on Luka, right? If Luka says, hey, look, bad year, we're going to regroup, we're going to be good, we're all right, everything's going to be good. If he comes out and, basically, like he was in that interview, in that post-game press conference, and he just has all the joy sucked out of it, regardless of whose fault it is. You know, there's somebody's got to roll for it. And unfortunately, that's just how the league is. So I wouldn't say that he's I wouldn't say it's like I wouldn't say he's definitely gone and they're going to make a change. But I definitely think that there's going to be way more media talk about it, especially if they start struggling. Imagine if they missed a play-in. You know, people are going to want to know.
I think he's safe for the rest of the season. Obviously, he's safe for the rest of the season. I think if they, I think regardless of how they finish, unless they get to a second or third round, it'll take the heat off him. But even a first round berth, somehow they get to 6, isn't going to be enough. I think that he's safe right now, and then he's got to an all-star break essentially next season to get this squad right. And then I think Cuban's got to make some tough decisions because it's obviously not going to work out. So I think he's still got some time, but it's just interesting that everyone's talking about Luka and Kyrie and not being a good fit. Well, you know, he's the head honcho as well, so he needs to make sure that they're firing. But we'll watch that space. Another Rogue Bogues and in the books. Appreciate everyone supporting the podcast. Make sure you get into some comments next week when we can answer some of your questions, and follow us on socials at Rogue Bogues, at Hoop Consultants for all your pro needs, and we will see you all next week.
All right, see you guys next week. Thanks.
Let's get rogue.